SNP spokesperson Patricia Gibson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I want to begin by thanking my honourable friend for Linlithgow and East Falkirk for his excellent exposition of the challenges that we faced. And this debate on e-petitions calling for the legal right to use cash payments in shops and requiring all businesses and public services to accept cash payments is actually very important. And since I was first elected, repeated concerns have been expressed about the decline of our cash infrastructure and the need to preserve it. And I've spoken on every single debate on this. And here we are again, alongside the honourable gentleman from Blackpool North and Claves. And it feels like we are, to a certain extent, banging our head off a wall as we face, with increasing urgency, the existential crisis which our cash infrastructure faces. The arguments have been well rehearsed in the past, they have again been well rehearsed today, and there is no denying that as a result of changes wrought by the COVID pandemic, the future of cash is even more uncertain. And many of us in this chamber today and beyond fear its demise has been accelerated. The situation becomes ever more urgent with every debate we have on this issue and with each passing day. From the outset, I think it's really important to underline the fact that the right to use cash, as the honourable gentleman from Blackpool North and Claves said and others have said, the right to use cash cannot be separated from free access to cash. There is no point, as we have heard, in legally ensuring the right to use cash if there is no reasonable access to cash. And it's important to remember that in Scotland, and more specifically, this debate takes place in the context of bank closures. This matters because without access to cash, it's simply not possible to use cash, and we can't say that too often. 53% of Scotland's bank branches have closed, and in my constituency, the situation with regards to bank closures is nothing less than appalling. Kilwinning has no bank, Beath has no bank, Dalry has no bank, West Kilbride has no bank, Kilwinning has no bank, Stevenston has no bank, Ardrossan has no bank. Indeed, only Saltcoats Largs and the Isle of Arran has a bank branch in the whole of my constituency. So if we are going to protect the cash infrastructure, we need a two-pronged approach, protecting access to cash and protecting the legal right to use cash. Overall, Scotland has suffered the highest percentage loss of bank branches than any other nation in the UK. So it's against this backdrop that any debate about access to cash and the use of cash must take place. But alongside this, we see our post offices under threat as postmasters struggle to even make minimum wage. And in all the towns in my constituency, the post offices, because they've got no banks, the post offices play a vital role in supporting our cash infrastructure because the banks have washed their hands. Yet, as an example, the town centre in Kilwinning has now lost its post office. While Post Office Limited is working hard to find a sub-postmaster to take on the franchise, this is proving very difficult and very challenging since it's so hard to turn a profit or even make minimum wage for the franchisee. And of course, it is true to say that the last Labour government closed down a whole slew of post offices, many in my constituency, and stripping post offices of the services that they were able to deliver. All of this has been exacerbated by the winding down of energy support upon which post offices are now currently relying. Of course, it would help if the banks paid postmasters properly for the work they do on their behalf, as they abandoned our towns. Banks must value those postmasters who are picking up the pieces that they have left behind, doing the bank's work for them for insufficient remuneration. This is simply unacceptable and has placed an unsustainable burden on postmasters, and it must be addressed, and I look forward to hearing the Minister's thoughts on that specific matter. And as if all this, Madam Chair, as if all of this were not enough, We see a worrying decline in cash machines, and especially free-to-use cash machines in communities across Scotland, and especially so in rural areas, as we have heard. The Centre for Social Justice has recently found that 38% of those on low incomes report having faced cash machine charges, compared to 17% of all consumers. Now that is what you call a poverty premium. The exploitative practice of a disproportionate number of pay-to-use cash machines in our most socio-economically challenged communities. Access to cash is vital if we are to demand, as we should demand, as we do demand, that it should be a legal right to use cash, and it must be a requirement that all businesses and public services should accept cash. The vast majority of us, as we have heard, use cash often and as when it is convenient to do so. Indeed, for many rural dwellers, as we've heard, there may be little choice due to digital challenges, which may be exacerbated by the weather, as we've seen only in recent weeks, as well as technical glitches which can strike without warning at any time. But for those more vulnerable customers, there must be the option to both access and use of cash if that is what they require and if that is what is most convenient for them. The Financial Conduct Authority has found that over 1 million adults in the UK do not have a bank account. There are also many who struggle to manage budgets electronically, or for those who simply prefer to manage their daily transactions in cash, such as older people, such as those on a budget. These people would face financial inclusion if our cash infrastructure is allowed to deteriorate further. We know during COVID that many consumers were unable to buy what they needed. 38% were turned away when trying to buy food from shops using cash. What happens to those who have no alternative to cash payments? Are they to be abandoned? What happened to the customer being king? Anyone who has ever faced any level of financial difficulty knows that when this is the case, banks cancel credit cards, or advice centres giving debt advice advise clients to cut their cards in half. And they do that to help them control their spending and manage their budget better, because we know that using plastic can often lead to losing track and overspending. Actually handling cash and seeing in real time what money you're spending is a huge, and I would argue, critical help in helping people budget. How much more so, Madam Chair, when budgets are under so much pressure and so much more precarious during this cost of living crisis, when everything costs more each time you go to the supermarket. That is certainly how it seems to me. And there is, of course, another side to this. Electronic payments incur a cost for firms, especially for those making many small transactions. And this is something that the UK Government should seek to address to help support our overall cash infrastructure. It isn't right that businesses should have to pay these fees. Whilst there was widespread welcoming of the provisions of the Financial Services and Marketing Act, granted new powers to the Financial Conduct Authority over the UK's largest banks and building societies to ensure that cash withdrawal and deposit facilities are available in communities across the country. Many people have said in this debate today, we need more detail on that, and we need to know how this will work in practice. So again, I'm hoping that the Minister will tell us more about that when he responds. But it is clear, as it has been clear for a long, long time, and it's been made more clear as we try to get back to normal after the pandemic. It's clear for a range of reasons, which have been well rehearsed today and in previous days, that consumers want and need the choice to pay for goods and services in cash. Consumers must not be forced down a cashless road that they don't want to go down or are simply not able to go down. The Government should uphold this right and protect our cash infrastructure for all the very sound reasons today, and they should do that enshrined in legislation, because it seems to me that that is becoming increasingly necessary. Fundamental to all of this is protecting free access to cash in all our communities. Financial inclusion matters, and the Government has a duty, a moral duty, to uphold this in principle as well as in practice.